Welcome back to another episode of 10 Minute Mood. Today we are talking about co-parenting after separation or divorce. And I have Rebecca McLeod of Watts McCray here with me. And we thought it would be interesting to discuss this based on a chapter in a recent report that was released called Australian Relationships, Love, Marriage and Divorce in a Modern Nation. And I will leave a link to that report, which is freely available on the show notes. If you're interested, it's well worth a read. There's a particular chapter in there called The Impacts of Separation on Children. And to me, that sounds like the perfect ground for us to have a discussion of where psychology and law might meet. So Rebecca, if we think about the impacts of separation on children, from a legal perspective, what should we be taking into account?
Yeah, and that's a really fair comment in the sense of if you look at it through the eyes of the kids or through the eyes of a judge or through the eyes of a parent. Obviously, I'm looking at it through the eyes of a lawyer, and our job is to interpret the law and advise our clients accordingly. So looking at it through that lens, what the Family Law Act tells us is that post-separation parenting arrangements should be governed by what the child's best interests are.
Right.
And I think it's a really important thing to have front and foremost because sometimes, not always, parents think about it from the lens of their rights, as opposed to what's actually best for the kids. And it's good that the law aligns with that. So, and then there's a bunch of rebuttable presumptions under the Family Law Act that help us unpack and identify what is in a child's best interest, but it needs to be really sort of vague because no two kids are the same, no two families are the same.
This idea of what is in the best interest of the child is fascinating to me in terms of who decides that, right?
So in terms of who decides, preferably the parents, it's the parents that aren't necessarily on the same page or have a different view around what arrangements might be appropriate that we do help. And that's when, hopefully, with lawyers' assistance, you can help them get on the same page because the backstop to that is a judge. How do we identify what's in a child's best interest?
Yeah.
And that law is also changing, but at the moment, the two overarching principles are that the court says, you can tell us otherwise, you can show us evidence to prove us otherwise, but we're going to assume it's in a child's best interest, one, to have a relationship with both parents, and two, to protect them from harm, be it psychological, physical, environmental, etc. And the second one trumps the first one. So if there's risk issues, then the court will always try and find a way to walk that line of saying, well, we'll facilitate a relationship, but in a way that's safe.
There's a lot of moving parts to that. From a psychology perspective, what goes through my mind is the importance of really trying to reduce the level of conflict that children are exposed to as well, though. And I imagine during this process of even figuring out the terms of co-parenting, that can be an incredibly long and potentially conflictual process.
In elaborating and unpacking in the child's best interest, there's a myriad of considerations. The law as it currently stands, because again, it's changing in May. The first consideration is the views of the children, and the weight that is attributed to that view is proportionate and relative to their age. The parent's involvement with the child to date, the parent's capacity to parent, whether or not there's been any domestic violence, any logistical considerations. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander comes into the mix. So there's a really wide net of things that are considered, but child's views and parents' capacity to parent and how they've been involved historically, domestic violence, probably the three sort of factors.
So it sounds like for a parent going through this process, there's their mental and emotional health to take into consideration as well. This sounds like a very stressful process to go through, especially if you are in conflict with your co-parent. From a psychology point of view, we know too that with separation and with divorce and trying to figure out co-parenting arrangements, that this can increase chances of anxiety and depression and psychological distress for the parents. And that obviously has a direct flow-on effect for the children as well. So it just sounds like a very delicate process that you are helping people to navigate here. Yeah,
you're absolutely right. It's a very delicate exercise and not one that you can necessarily prove or disprove. I mean, we can obviously lean on experts as and when we need to, But that can be quite tricky because these experts are only interviewing the parents and the kids for a really brief period of time. The goal certainly is to not have the parents involved in protracted conflict because that's a lose-lose for everyone, and the kids are either directly or indirectly exposed to it. The goal is always to try and resolve it as quickly and as amicably as possible.
Obviously, children are growing up and their developmental needs are changing rapidly. So is there some process in place here for what happens over time? Like that these plans would get revised?
Yeah, it's a really good question, question. And the short answer is not really. What the court is trying to do is to give finality. They're trying to make it so that the kids aren't and the parents aren't dragged back through that system continually. So they're doing this balancing act of not having a crystal ball and committing to something that's long term, assuming that that is the lesser evil of the parents potentially being in protracted conflict. That being said, there is a backdoor to parenting orders. There's case law that's been codified with these amendments that are coming in May to basically say if there's a significant change in circumstance, that's when the court will say, well, yeah, it's appropriate that you come back and we might have to change these parenting orders.
The other place my mind goes to is the fundamental importance here of communication skills and this idea of co-parents being co-parents sort of forevermore, even once, separation, divorce takes place, and trying to find ways to help co-parents communicate with one another about their children in order to keep the best interests of their children in mind can be really difficult too from my end, from the psychology end. Is there anything in this legal process that you're talking about that prioritizes or builds into it communication skills or any kind of skills?
If things are really bad on the home front and they're co-parenting, what I'll typically talk to a client about and or the other side about is suggesting a combination or some of the above family therapy. So getting therapeutic intervention involved, education through like a post-separation parenting program. And there's a myriad of those for very vast number of different situations. And then more recently, there's been an option called parenting coordination that's available to parties. And that's available for people who have got their final parenting orders, but are having some problems implementing it. So it's not there to renegotiate or move the goalposts. It's, an example that was a real example was kids are with dad. There was a death on mum's side of the family. Dad wasn't particularly comfortable about giving up his time. Mum clearly wanted the kids to attend the funeral. Parenting coordinator specifically qualified in that area. Help them work that out.
Yeah, I think it's so hard when you're together in a relationship, let alone to separate and then to be trying to co-parent when you're no longer together. So I think we can all work on our communication skills. Because I think about the protective factors here, for children whose parents are going through separation and divorce and the negative impact this can have on children's mental and emotional health. We know a lot about the kinds of things that can mitigate the chances of that risk. And some of that is about their parents having a certain level of communication with one another that is not conflictual in nature. It's about showing emotional interest towards their child and what they're going through during that period of time as well. And so building in skills along that process that would help to build up any of those protective factors. And I guess that's where we step in as psychologists, perhaps, is that we can provide some of that guidance.
And I think a really tricky line that some parents find, the younger the child is, the more obvious it is, but the level of information that you convey to children, where's mum or where's dad, or are we moving, or am I changing schools? And those questions can't necessarily go unanswered for too long because that's, I would imagine, also stressful for a child. But a really common theme and a really common problem I'm noticing is the kids being involved in what we call it adult issues. I want to see you more, but your mum won't let me.
One of the worst things you can do, you're now asking your child to take your side against the other parent, and it sets up these really painful dynamics for children and real attachment wounds that, often children carry into the rest of their life. And so when you ask your child to join in with you, to give the other parent a hard time, it's really emotionally and relationally damaging.
Absolutely agree. But I can imagine if when posed with that questions, the parent's struggling to say, how do I answer that? How do I word this in a way that doesn't fob them off, but also doesn't involve them in the level of conflict?
It's so hard. And I think it's a really good point you raise. And I think making the distinction between trying to provide the child with developmentally appropriate facts, but doing it in a manner, and this is often really hard for the parent to do because they're often, rightly so, very emotional during this time, right? And even speaking about what their partner may have done may be a very emotional topic for them. But to present it in a way that's developmentally appropriate, but also reminding the child that that's not their burden to carry, essentially. Yeah. Here's something that happened between, your dad and I, but that doesn't mean anything about your relationship with him. And I still want you to have a good relationship with him. I still support that. I still think he's a good dad to you. Like really, so you can still protect their relationship as much as possible while making it clear what happened between you and them. And that's really the nuance of it, I think, is, and I mean, even that gets cloudy depending on exactly what happened. The nuance is, how can I be open and honest with my child without also asking them to emotionally defend me? Often advice that I find myself giving to clients as well when they're talking about starting this process, a lot of people, I think it's counterintuitive that involving a lawyer would actually maybe make this faster and less conflictual. It takes, having that third party takes some of the emotion out of this. Even for people that think it's okay, we're amicable, we can sort this out. I often think that at least seeking some initial advice helps you to be informed, helps you to know what next steps might look like if you need them.
I absolutely agree with that sentiment. It's information, which is a classic saying, which is empowering, particularly when it comes to kids. So just inform yourself.
Oh, thank you so much, Rebecca. It's been a delight to talk to you. You're clearly so knowledgeable in this area, so I appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of 10 Minute Mood, the podcast hosted by Sydney City Psychology. We are a group of psychologists and a GP located in Sydney, Australia. We also do online therapy. You can find out more about us by going to our website, sydneycitypsychology.com.au. We also have a really thorough section on our website outlining helpful free resources for different challenges that you might be facing. We have what we call resource kits available there, so it's well worth checking out. You can also find us on social media. You can find our contact information in the show notes. Thank you so much to Rebecca from Watts McCray for being here today. You will find a link to her, to Watts McCray, and to the report which we were discussing, all in the show notes. Look forward to seeing you next time.